Recording has stopped. This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to our town hall, Masks for Equity. Just a couple announcements before we get started. First of all, just thank you all so much for being here. And we're really excited to have so many people on this call and such a great lineup of speakers. We have interpretation. We have Spanish and English languages today. So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a globe icon with some lines on it, and it says interpretation. If you click that, you can select a language, either English or Spanish. And we're asking, everyone to do that. And I'm gonna ask Heidi if you could make that announcement in Spanish.
Yes, of course. I will say the same instructions in Spanish. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Heidi. Junto con mi colega Sagrario estaremos interpretando para ustedes al idioma español de forma simultánea. Les pedimos que por favor seleccionen su lenguaje. En la parte inferior de su pantalla se encuentra un globo terráqueo. Si lo selecciona, usted puede ver que puede elegir entre inglés y español. Todos deben elegir un lenguaje. Aunque hablen inglés, necesitan elegir un lenguaje. Por si alguien más comparte, nos podrá escuchar cuando interpretemos. Si nos acompaña por teléfono inteligente o por una tableta, le pedimos que busque los 3 puntos o la opción de More o más, y ahí encontrará las opciones de lenguaje. Muy importante que presione el botón terminar o Done para poder hacer efectiva la acción de interpretación. Si tiene alguna duda o pregunta en relación a interpretación, comuníquese con nosotros en el chat y le ayudaremos por escrito. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heidi. We also have captioning for this meeting tonight, and you can turn the captions on by clicking the More button at the bottom of your screen and then show subtitle. I also want to give our sincere apologies that we were not able to get ASL interpretation tonight. Unfortunately, all the interpreters that we work with were not available. But if someone is here and needs ASL interpretation, we will be able to get the recording interpreted after the meeting. So that is not what we wanted, but it's what we are able to do right now. I just want to introduce myself. I'm Rhea Small. I use she and her pronouns, and I'm an organizer at Senior and Disability Action. I'm here co-facilitating this meeting with Beth Kenny, an SDA member. And so in addition to the interpretation and other announcements, we have a couple of people doing Zoom tech. So Jessica and Kathy DeLuca and Jessica Lehman are both helping out with tech. So if you're having trouble with Zoom, with interpretation, or with the chat, or seeing, or anything like that, feel free to chat. Jessica changed her name to Zoom Tech/Access. Also, if you have access needs that aren't being met, Jessica can help you navigate those. And we have a few hashtags that we're using to live tweet this event. And one of them is the Masks for Equity hashtag, which I'll put in the chat. So if you are tweeting along, feel free to use Masks for Equity or retweet from SDA. Also, Tinu, who's one of our speakers tonight, is going to be live tweeting at her account, which is at TINU. And we also are using the No Body is Disposable hashtag. And feel free to use other hashtags as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Beth to introduce herself.
Thanks, Rhea. I'm Beth Kenny. I'm a member of the Senior and Disability Action, and I'm a fat, gender non-conforming person with disabilities who is immune compromised and a parent to a train-loving child who is under the age of 5. So the removal of the mask mandate on public transportation has really made our world a lot less accessible. And it's been great to be able to work with Rhea and members of the many other dedicated members of SDA to advocate for masks on public transit.
Thank you, Beth. So we pulled together this town hall on very short notice due to the urgency of the issue. As probably many people here know, last week, a federal judge in Florida struck down the nationwide mask requirement on transit that was set by the Transportation Security Administration, and it covered trains, buses, subways, paratransit, and air travel. And instead of waiting for the ruling to be appealed, local transit agencies across the country, including ours here in the Bay Area, dropped their mask requirement with zero notice or community input. Masking on transit is not an issue of personal choice. It's an issue of social equity. Just a year ago, we heard the CDC, state and local health departments, and our mayors and transit agencies saying that masks are necessary in indoor public places to slow the spread of COVID, to protect ourselves and others, and to prevent hospitals from going back into crisis mode. Now we're seeing a sudden reversal of policy, despite high COVID transmission rates around the country. Meanwhile, hundreds or thousands of people in the US are dying every day from COVID, and millions are becoming disabled through long COVID.
For many people with disabilities, public transit and paratransit are the only transportation options. This essential service allows us to access our medical appointments, our jobs, and get our grocery shopping done. There are people with disabilities who are unable to mask, and they need the protection of the mask mandates to ensure their health. There are people who are at high risk for severe COVID who are putting off medical appointments because without masking, the risk of traveling on public transit is too great. Our public transit policies should prioritize the safety of those who are at the greatest risk of severe illness from COVID, which in turn will benefit everybody. If we bring back the mask requirements, bus drivers and BART operators will be safer in their jobs. Children will be safer traveling to school, and they will be less likely to bring COVID home to their family members. Essential workers will be less likely to bring COVID to their workplaces, protecting their coworkers and the general public. Seniors will be less isolated at home. Black and Latinx people who have lost an average of almost 3 and 4 years in life expectancy, respectively, during the pandemic, will live longer lives as a result. Continuing to require masks on public transit is an obvious choice and in line with the values of public health and racial equity and disability justice. We have a great lineup of speakers tonight that will hopefully include Dr. Luis Aronson, a practicing geriatrician and professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. Dr. Aronson is going to attempt to join us from an airport. So we're going to be a little bit flexible and try and insert her into the agenda when she's available.
Right, thank you so much, Beth. Just one more quick announcement is that we have a Google form posted in the chat. Zoom Tech Kathy posted just now. So if you're interested in staying updated with this campaign, please fill out the Google form and we'll let you know about upcoming meetings, more events, and opportunities to give public comment on the issue of masking in transit. So now I'm going to introduce our first speaker of the evening. Our first speaker is Loren Steinberg. Loren is a queer disabled person of color who is at high risk for COVID. Pre-pandemic, they used BART and AC Transit as their primary means of transportation. Loren is also an employer of personal care attendants who rely on public transit to get around. Welcome, Loren.
Hello. Thank you for inviting me to talk to you guys tonight. I think I just really want to point out or kind of reiterate the fact that when it comes to a global pandemic involving a respiratory airborne illness, there is no such thing as personal choice. All of that is literally out the window. I was just reading the other day about a school in Marin County that held a dance, and they kind of same as public transit. They had the policy that masks are highly encouraged but not required. After the dance, guess what happened? 90 kids tested positive. Now imagine that scaled up to the number of riders on public transit every single day. You know, like was mentioned in my bio, I have a physical disability. I am at higher risk for COVID. And so since the mask mandates on BART and on buses went away, that ability to go places independently is taken away from me. And in addition to that, I have personal care providers that don't have cars. They have to ride on BART. So what's so frustrating for me personally right now is that even though I'm not actually getting on BART or buses myself, I'm still potentially exposed to that higher risk that is resulting from taking away the mask mandate. So I just really hope that the powers that be take that into consideration and think about the fact that they're essentially saying, oh, we're okay with people getting sick and dying if it means that we don't have to like inconvenience our able-bodied riders to wear a mask, when honestly masking is like the least that we can and should be doing right now. And it's just, I find it exhausting and frustrating that we're still here even like debating this, that we're even using our energy to debate whether we should still be wearing masks and whether disabled people and elderly people and people at risk deserve to be protected or not. Like, it shouldn't even be a question.
Thanks, Loren. Powerful words. And yeah, there's, you know, it's not, the argument seems about us, but it's beyond just people with disabilities. There's long COVID, there's that everybody is susceptible to, but focusing the argument on people with disabilities has really made us neglect that reality. Next up, we are going to hear from Rebecca Saltzman. Rebecca Saltzman was elected president of the BART Board of Directors in 2022. She previously served as vice chair of the Oakland Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, where she advised the city of Oakland on pedestrian and bicycle policies and infrastructures. Director Saltzman has been a leader in advocating for masking on BART. Thank you and welcome, Director Saltzman, or President.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone at Senior Disability Action, not only for organizing this event, but for all of the work you've done to bring this issue to the forefront. I think for a lot of folks, people are getting really tired of COVID. I think we all are, and folks want to wish it to be over, but it's not over. And particularly for our most vulnerable populations, it's absolutely not over and still really scary. So, you know, in the past months, as it looked like the mask mandate might expire at some point, we didn't know when, I started to talk to our general manager about what we could do. But in reality, the decision last week was sprung on BART, just like it was sprung on all the transit agencies in the Bay Area and all over the country. None of us expected that ruling last week. So really none of us were prepared to protect our riders. Our general manager doesn't have authority to just institute a mask mandate on his own. We've been relying on the federal and state mandate. And so we had lots of discussions last week, and I decided to introduce a mask mandate that the BART board will be voting on this Thursday. I'm hopeful that we will have a majority of the board, and hopeful it will be a strong majority of the board that votes for it, because our board has been very concerned about safety from COVID throughout the past 2 years of this pandemic. And one of the key parts of BART's mission is to keep our riders safe. And what easier way to keep riders safe than by requiring masks? It's something that's so simple to do, to put on your mask as you get to a BART station and take it off as you leave the BART station if you're not going somewhere else you need it. It's very easy to do even if you're at low risk, but it protects those people at high risk, people with underlying health conditions, people who are immunocompromised, and people under 5. And it's very personal for me because I have a 2-year-old daughter and she will be one of the first in line to get vaccinated. But they keep, pushing that date back. It looks like now the soonest will be June. So we really need to protect the young children that have no protection at this point. There also aren't N95 masks for little kids. The best she can do is a surgical mask, which she's pretty good about wearing, but on a bad day, she'll certainly rip it off. So her and other people really depend on other people wearing their N95 masks reliably. It's also personal to me because I have a nephew who's autistic, who also struggles with wearing a mask, and he has a lot of underlying health conditions that puts him at very high risk of COVID. Just this past week, my other nephew in the same household was exposed to COVID and was actually staying away from his brother because he was so worried about exposing him. But these are the folks we need to protect. And there's so many stories. The stories that have come in by some of your members and by other folks around the Bay Area, it's been, difficult to hear them about the decisions people are making about not riding transit. And so I'm very hopeful that we can change that come this Thursday and people will feel safe to get back on transit. And I'm not only calling on the BART board to pass this, but I'm calling on every other transit agency board to do the same thing. And we'll be reaching out as soon as we pass ours. And today I sent a letter to the 5 Bay Area health officers that represent the counties that BART goes through, asking them to implement a region-wide transit mask mandate, just like LA County's health officer did last week. That is really the best course of action because we have more than 24 transit agencies in the region, and it's going to take a long time to deal with this agency by agency, and it should really be region-wide, just like we've had through COVID, all the protections we've had, and we've been the leaders. So I hope you'll join me in calling on the health officers as well to address this at the regional issue. It might be the best way to get protection throughout transit, throughout the Bay Area. So again, thank you so much, and I hope we will have a big win for all of you on Thursday.
Thank you so much, President Rebecca Saltzman. Thank you so much for joining us and also for your leadership on this issue. As soon as we reached out to Director Saltzman, she wanted to talk with us and listen to our concerns and was already working on this. So it's really an honor to have you here. So now, because this is an action-oriented town hall, we're going to take 5 minutes and let Rebecca's colleagues on the BART board know that we support her resolution. So we're going to share some information on the screen and in the chat, and we'll also read some of it out. Contact information for other BART board directors who have not yet taken a position on the issue of masks on BART. So we can call them or email them or tweet at them and just let them know that we're here at this town hall and we support masks for equity and we support the resolution that's going to be introduced on Thursday. So I'm going to see if Kathy can share some info on the screen.
Yeah, just give me one second.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, everybody get yourselves ready. I'll be right there.
All right, thanks, Kathy. And we're also going to share our action guide in the chat. And the action guide has a phone script. It has the phone numbers of BART board directors, also email and Twitter information, and contact information also for AC Transit and SFMTA. So we'll share that. All right, awesome. Okay, so we've got, I'll just read out a few phone numbers in case people can't see the screen. Deborah Allen, District 1, Contra Costa County, is deborah.allen@bart.gov. That's DEBORA.ALLEN bart.gov. And then her phone number is 925-391-8866. And that's also shared on the screen. And we'll put this link in the chat too. All right. So feel free to contact any of the BART directors. If you know who your representative is, you can contact them. If you don't know, just feel free to pick any of them. And we're going to take about 5 minutes to do that. And if you can share in the chat who you emailed or called, that would be great. So we can just see how many messages we're sending through. Oh yeah, and I see Director Jean Walsh from AC Transit in the chat saying, contact AC Transit directors as well. And we have their information in the toolkit too. All right, so before we go to break, just want to ask quickly, we have someone here who can do ASL interpretation. Is there anyone who needs ASL interpretation who's present? If you want to post in the chat or use raise hand. And someone else asked in the chat about a template to modify for the emails. We don't really have a template because what we heard is that the directors really like personalized emails, but we do have talking points. If you scroll down into the toolkit, we have talking points there. All right, so we're gonna just take 5 minutes and post in the chat if you left a message, if you sent an email, if you did some tweets, and we'll be back. Kathy, if you want to play some music for us while we email and call us. All right, thank you so much. We have another great song coming up. So I hope that a lot of you got to send some emails and make some calls. It looks like in the chat we did. We contacted Deborah Allen, Director Mark Foley, Robert Rayburn, yeah, a whole bunch of other transit officials. We probably sent at least, I don't know, 50 messages or calls right now. So that's really awesome. Wonderful. So we are waiting for Louise Aronson to join us, and I don't believe she's here yet. But Louise, if you're here, feel free to chat to me or post in the chat, and we'll squeeze you in when you're available. Great. So I'm going to turn it back over to Beth, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Rhea. Welcome back, everyone, and feel free to keep sharing in the chat anyone you've contacted and what you said. Next up, I am honored and very excited to welcome Tinu Abayomi-Paul. I'm sorry, I practiced it and I think I got it wrong.
That's okay.
But Tinu is a writer and activist, a disability advocate, and the founder of Organization Everywhere Accessible. She is also a member of Global Healthy Living Foundation's COVID-19 Patient Leadership Council Board, the National Pains Community Council, as well as Women Whose Tech's U.S. Startup Advisory Board. Tinu is active at Twitter at Tinu, where she has shared her own COVID experiences and why masks are essential for disability access. And it's also where I'm familiar with Tinu from, and really appreciate what you do on the Twitter platform. So welcome, Tinu.
Thank you very much. I apologize that I can't share my video screen. This is short notice and I wasn't able to get myself together enough to be on the screen and be on video, but I am here. And I wanted to share my story and talk about what happened to me kind of as a cautionary tale and to maybe encourage the change back to mask protection. At the beginning of January, after 6 months of just begging our county here in Texas to allow some kind of protections for masks in schools for our kids. Our kids had to go back to school. We have 2 sets of twins, and the younger set had to go back to school without a mandate for mask protection. So some people would wear a mask and some people wouldn't. That includes teachers, janitors, everybody. Before you know it, we were getting notices every day that somebody at their school had COVID. They wouldn't tell us which kid, what class, nothing like that. Almost immediately, like the second day they were at school, I started getting sick. I was sick all of January, every single day. And then towards the end of January, I started getting really sick. Like one day I was just fine, with just like a regular flu symptoms kind of sick. And then all of a sudden I was feverish. I could barely get out of bed and make it to the restroom. And I have like an ensuite restroom next to my room. It was terrible. My mother was on vacation. She's been a nurse for 50 years. And she's usually who I go to when I'm so sick that I can barely get around. She came back and gave me the COVID test on February 1st in the evening. I tested positive, but I could barely breathe. So she went to get me some oxygen. We usually can get, backup oxygen for my asthma if it becomes necessary. She got some. And pardon?
Spanish, niggers, blah, 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 dumbheads.
Okay, so somebody needs to kick whoever that
Spanish
is.
people, what the heck? Blah, 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 blah. Fucking retard. You fucking.
Sorry about that, folks. Very apologetic for the very offensive comments. Give us just a second to figure out what that was and move on.
Do you want me to hang out or keep going?
Yeah, you can keep going, Tinu. Very sorry you got interrupted. People won't be able to chat. Actually, let me make sure we can get our interpreter back.
Okay.
1 moment.
I'll pause.
Oops. Okay, interpreter, sorry. You should be able to start video again. Will it let you? Okay. We're gonna go ahead for a moment without interpreting. Apologies.
Things happen when you are trying to shine a light. It attracts darkness. That just happens. Anyway, I think I was talking about what first happened when I got COVID. And they brought me oxygen. I used up what should have lasted a month in like 2 days. So we called an ambulance because I couldn't even make it to the bathroom anymore. It was like that serious, just trying to make regular motions. And of course, for those of you who don't know, I have several chronic illnesses, including asthma. 10 years ago, I had pneumonia. I still have lung scarring. So this was on top of other things. Having chronic illnesses and disabilities made it worse for me. But for 2 years, I was able to keep from getting COVID by staying in the house like most of us do, except to go to the doctor and for, once a year type outings. I got to the hospital and they actually took me to the wrong hospital. And I found this out because I was too sick to be moved. They took me to some place that doesn't normally accept my insurance, but the doctor refused to let me go. That's how close I came to dying. They thought I would die in transit, even with breathing treatments and oxygen if I was moved again. So I was in the hospital for about 2.5 weeks. And the experience in the hospital, I didn't get the kind of treatment that I got when I had regular pneumonia. This time I had COVID pneumonia. And the treatment for you if you're not going to be intubated, if you're kind of overcoming it without extra help, is not what it was before. The hospitals is full, they're understaffed, and they don't have the same amount of advice as they did before. You know, they have good drugs. The doctors and the nurses do what they can, but a lot of my treatment happened after I went home. When I went home, my left lung was not functioning yet. So the system is overrun already. There isn't, and especially for chronically ill people, there isn't this understanding in the hospital that we have to go through more things and that we need more resources in order to recover. I wouldn't wish this getting any type of COVID on any of us who are chronically ill. We've lost too many people already, where it hits us harder. And if you have other infections or other issues, it can bring them back. For me, I have chronic lymphocytic leukemia. It never completely goes away. It's a chronic cancer, but it was controlled and almost dormant. It would pop up sometimes and I could get an infusion or some small treatment and it would go back, to sleep. This time the COVID has brought it back with a vengeance, and it's costing a small fortune to keep it under control, even with insurance. So we need these mask protections because we don't know what else is out there that could get worse. For example, the Epstein-Barr virus I was just reading today, which 90% of humans have, and that what is it called? It causes, or it's a factor in MS. So, and also besides the fact that viruses can be what turns on ME in some people, it's not being taken seriously by the general population. And I suspect that instead of making the focus, which it should be, about us and protecting us, we're going to have to start making it about them, and them realizing that this is not a disease to play with. And I don't know how we would be able to do that, but at some point we're going to have to really hit hard for them to realize and understand this, because as you were saying earlier, with long COVID, it's creating this generation of more disabled people, not to mention the people who are going to have heart and lung and all kinds of systemic problems for life. So I'm hoping we can get these mask protections under control. Now, the one last thing I have to say about it is, I think that the better strategy is what you're doing, which is appealing directly to the transit authorities and keeping it local. In Texas, the state level has completely failed us. The only thing that we can do is appeal to counties and appeal to cities and towns and smaller municipalities. So unless you have a question or something, I'm going to go ahead and rest my lungs. Thank you for having me. I hope that working together, we can overcome this.
Thank you so much, Tinu. Thank you for being willing to share your story with us and making time to join us all the way from Texas and while you're recovering.
A pleasure.
Yeah, we're really happy to be working together. And also, there are people across the country, and even I saw someone in Canada in the chat, people care about this issue all over, and we're hoping that some of the strategies we're trying here can be replicated other places, and we can build a movement nationwide to bring back masks on transit. So Jessica wants to make a quick announcement about tech.
Hi, folks. Sorry again for the offensive interruption, especially in the middle of Tinu's really powerful story. We turned off the chat and all capabilities. I'm sure folks noticed that. We are going to turn it back on partially. Before I do that, of course, we run the risk of other Zoom bombing. So I want to just kind of give people a moment. If you want to turn away, turn your volume down for just a second while we check it out, please do that. Okay, actually, it looks like somebody put it Oh, okay. So I'm going to give people the option to start video and chat. What we're going to do is not give people the ability to rename yourself. But if you want to change it, if you want to add pronouns or something else that's useful, put that in the chat to one of us who says Zoom tech and we'll rename you. But that way we can keep people from changing names to keep us from knowing who causes problems. And we're not going to let people unmute themselves. But when we get to open Q&A, our facilitators will let you know and we'll handle that. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right, thank you so much, Jessica. All right, so and yeah, thank you again, Tinu, for sharing your story and for being here with us. So our next speaker, we just added to the agenda, so a surprise speaker. Their name is Blue Lopez. Blue uses he and they pronouns. Blue is an Indigenous and Latinx non-binary disabled 10th grader at Fremont High School in Oakland. Blue had COVID and is at high risk being on AC Transit and BART. And yeah, big thank you, Blue, for joining us on short notice, and to Maya for introducing us. Yeah, so I'm going to spotlight Blue.
Hi everybody, I'm sorry my video isn't working, my computer camera is broken, but I have an eating disorder and I also have problems with my leg. So last time I had COVID, I actually unintentionally lost like a few pounds and I was down to like 68 pounds about there. And I had vertigo, so I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, I'm sorry. But I was fainting and I was like really dizzy. I also have a premature baby sister and she got COVID, and when we took her to the hospital, they actually didn't let her in. Like they didn't let her stay because she wasn't sick enough and the hospital was already full with kids that had COVID. That was around winter break, so on New Year. And I was actually working on like the whole OUSD fight with the COVID protocols and stuff like that, and I'm so annoyed that we have to do that all over again with public transit. It's really annoying, but it's just, I feel like when we bring it up that it's a lot of disabled, elderly, and kids dying, they're just like, it's fine because nobody else is dying. So, which is really annoying. It's literally eugenics, and I bring it up all the time because it's so awful how common the eugenics arguments are during with all of this, and it's really just it really shows how terrible our society has been during COVID. And I feel like we need to take care of all especially the children, because well, for me, I have had my chance to live. My baby sister hasn't. She's a few months old. And the fact that so many kids were sick that they had to turn her down because all the beds, all the rooms were filled with little sick kids, is just terrifying, and it's so sad. And I feel like we really need to do better. It's a cloth. It's cloth on your face. It's really not that hard to wear unless you're neurodivergent and you have sensory issues, stuff like that. But unless you have that, then it's really just a piece of cloth. It's not that hard to wear it. So I just want to let you guys know that everybody here is worthy of protection, no matter your age or your disability or like anything like that. You're worthy of the protection, and if people don't want to give it to you, it just really shows how cold-hearted they are. And honestly, it's just, yeah, disgusting.
Thank you so much, Blue. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And, you know, it's really scary that hospitals are full of children with COVID. And, you know, we aren't even really hearing about that very much on the news. And also just wanted to give a shout out to the student organizers of the Oakland student strike. back during the peak of the Omicron wave, students all across Oakland organized a student strike and walkout and petition and, organized to get high quality masks and better ventilation and an outdoor seating area for lunch. And it was just incredibly inspiring to us and kind of was, one of the things that made us feel like, oh, we can do something about this. So yeah, really admire the work that Oakland students have been doing. And yeah, thank you, Blue, for being part of that and sharing. All right, so I don't believe that Louise Aronson is here, but if you are, feel free to post in the chat. All right. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who may be our last unless Louise can join us. So next up, we have Cherelle Jackson. Cherelle is a labor leader for SEIU 10-1, and she co-chairs the Workers with Disabilities Committee, working closely with seniors, veterans, and disabled workers. She's also active in other groups at SEIU 10-1, and attended our rally that we had in front of SFMTA the week before last. So that's where we connected with Cherelle. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here, Cherelle. Just to note that you're muted, and I can make you a co-host so you can share your screen too.
Letting me unmute.
It's good. You're unmuted now. Sorry, I think I.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you all for allowing me to be here today. And grateful that you all put this together, because there are so many vulnerable communities that really need to hear from us and ensure that we advocate on their behalf and just amplify their voices. So many seniors and disabled, and also our youth that are vulnerable while they're using public transit. I'm going to share my screen here in just a moment here, and just give me one moment here to get that connected. Okay. So my name again is Cherelle Jackson, she, her pronouns, in the California Assembly District 17 ADEM, the co-chair of Workers with Disabilities Committee for SEIU 10-1, Director of Communications for Justice, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, the Secretary of Retirement Security Committee, Madam President of Black Voices and Allies Leadership Committee, and the Executive Producer for Rosemount Podcast, and so much more. I'm incredibly active in a lot of different spaces to ensure that we represent and get the job done. Today, we're going to have a discussion on how wearing a mask can help to slow the spread of COVID-19 on public transit and to protect our seniors, disabled, and youth so that we can have mask equity. Mass equity looks like a vulnerable community has the same ridership experience versus other riders. Amid the COVID-19 crisis, wearing a face mask has become a way of protection from the virus. The mission of SFMTA, or San Francisco Municipal Transportation Association, envisions a city of diverse, thriving neighborhoods that connect communities to safe, reliable, affordable transportation for all. It oversees muni biking, walking, parking, while also regulating our transit and taxis. The average ridership, or average daily boardings for Muni, is up 85.7% as of February 2022. Public transit is an important part of the economy. We need to strengthen the social and cultural connections and provide an inclusive, safe experience for riders. Not only does it ensure that individuals have access to get the places they need to be, but it ensures that those who are lower income, vulnerable, and more dependent on transit can get to work, that they're able to go to the grocery store, and it means that if you needed to go to the laundromat, you could get there. A single mother can take her kids to school. Muni trains, buses, streetcars get us to our favorite stores in the downtown to shop, to get to the latest fashion. a nice dinner with our friends, or a quick stop at AMC for a movie. But for our seniors and disabled veterans, and for our lower income communities, it's about ensuring they have a safe route to ensure access to meds, to get to clinics, to visit the grandkids on the weekends, to get the resources from the nonprofits that they receive benefits from. The difference is, if they don't have a ride there, they miss out on receiving those benefits for the day, and sometimes going days without services. Days without medication is a health risk. During the pandemic, we developed tactics to reduce exposure to COVID-19, ensuring that individuals had access to masks, PPE, and other sustainable resources. Vaccines were developed to help reduce those risks, while some may have survived the pandemic, finding other ways to commute. But our seniors and disabled communities experienced a very different reality. It reduced their ridership for fear of being exposed to COVID-19, and it provided even more difficulty to riders where routes were reduced or difficult to access due to location. Wearing a community face mask can prevent the spread of viruses because you and anyone can be a carrier. Wearing a face mask on public transit is a courtesy or a polite way of making sure our most vulnerable seniors and disabled have a safe rider experiences too. As we slowly begin to open back up, we need to ensure that we do it in a safe and equitable manner. Communities that are vulnerable, such as our seniors, disabled, and immunocompromised, want to be able to use public transit just like anyone else. San Francisco, we have work to do to create a safe, inclusive public transit for all. The end. Remember to stay safe, wear a mask on public transit, and if you have to step out of the house, you need to wear a community face mask. Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Cherelle.
Sorry.
A wonderful presentation. And yeah, community face masks keep us all safe, including the public transit workers. So thank you for that. And before we open it up for questions and comments, we're going to take another action together. We heard from the BART Board of Directors and AC Transit Board of Directors that they want to hear from riders before voting on mask policies. The BART Board is scheduled to vote this Thursday on a mask policy, and AC Transit is starting the conversation this week at their Wednesday meeting. SFMTA has not been responsive to us yet, but maybe if they hear from us, more of us, they will decide to respond. We're going to take 5 minutes right now, call, email, or tweet our representatives. Please take a minute to call or email Jeffrey Tumlin, the director of SFMTA, at the number on the screen. Thank you, everybody. And I'm really moved by the stories and speakers we're having tonight. So thank you again. I just want to take a minute to repeat the phone number for the Board of Directors at Muni and San Francisco Paratransit. It's 415-646-4470. And you can also email them at MTA board, BOARD, at SFMTA.com. Thanks. Keep it up, everybody.
Oh, she may be weary. Them young girls, they do get wearied wearing that same old shaggy dress. Yeah, yeah. But when she gets weary, try a little tenderness. Yeah, yeah. Oh, man, that. You know she's waiting, just anticipating for things that she'll never, 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 never possess. Yeah, yeah. But while she's there waiting, and without them, try a little tenderness. That's all you gotta do. It's not just sentimental, no, no, no. She has her grief and care, yeah, yeah, yeah. But the soft words, they are spoke so gentle, yeah. It makes it easier to bear, yeah. You won't regret it, no, no. Young girls, they don't forget it. Love is their home, happiness, yeah. But it's all so easy. All you gotta do is try.
All right, welcome back, everyone. It looks like we sent a lot of tweets to Jeffrey Chumlin. I'm excited to see if he responds, and also a lot of emails and calls. Yeah, and people are dancing while taking action, which is a great combination. So yeah, thank you all so much. So now we're going to open it up for question and comment from all the participants here, because we want to hear from everyone who wants to share like how you feel about the mask requirements on transit being taken away, what your experience is with BART, with Muni, with Paratransit, with AC Transit. Maybe you ride Golden Gate Transit, maybe you take Caltrain. There's so many different types of transportation that are being affected by this. So we are going to open it up for comments and questions. If you have a question for one of the speakers, just let them know, and we'll, at the end, we'll see the speakers who are able to stick around can respond. And because we want to hear from as many people as possible, we're going to keep it to 2 minutes per person to share. And when you get close to your time, our timekeeper, Michael Lyon, will hold up a little sign. So we'll spotlight him so you can see that. And if that's not accessible to you, then we'll just interrupt you if you go over your time. So apologies in advance about that. So you can either use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or you can post in the chat. You can just post the word stack if you want to talk. And we have people who are going to be scanning the chat. Yeah, Beth and I will take turns calling on people. So yeah, so I see a bunch of hands already. Let's see if we can find Michael to spotlight him. Right. Okay, there's Michael. So he'll be holding up the sign when you're getting close to 2 minutes. All right, so yeah, oh, 1 minute warning, perfect. Wonderful, okay. So let's see, I see a hand from Roland Wong. Roland, do you wanna speak first?
Hi, thank you for this Zoom meeting. Let's see, my name is Roland Wong. I also serve on several transit committee known as MAC and BART. And so my concern is, I had asked the question regarding why Muni had been so crowded. I know people need to get around, in the city, but I was told that that they no longer do social distancing. And so that was kind of raised an eyebrow to me. As far as the buses are so crowded, especially the heavily used lines like the 38 Gary, the 14, anyway, I just want to make that comment that, it's just so uncomfortable riding Muni, more or less. BART isn't so bad because, they basically, have 10-car trains, running into the city. Well, thank you for hearing me out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Roland, for sharing. And yeah, that's a really important point. It's masking and also restoring the bus service so that buses aren't too crowded. And yeah, we need it all to be safe. Let's see. So I see a hand from someone named Lori A. Lori A, I'm gonna ask you. Oh yeah.
Before you do that, Dr. Aronson is here for, I think, 5 minutes.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so we're gonna invite Dr. Aronson to briefly share with us because she wasn't able to make it earlier, and then we'll come back to open question and comment. So welcome, Dr. Aronson.
Thank you. Sorry for the trouble. They were messing with my flight, so I had to panic and stand in a long line of some masked people and lots of not masked people. So thank you for doing this. I wish I could be a better participant. And I don't know what's gone on before, so it's hard to know what to say other than I think we have to figure out some way to have a conversation about how it's just consideration for others. Now, have I heard people live and read about them who say, well, other people's health isn't my problem? I'm going to choose to believe that most people don't feel that way and that the information just isn't really getting out. I also see people who appear to be at risk themselves not wearing masks. And when people ask me, I mean, I have all sorts of, not fit for primetime thoughts inside my skull, but outside, what I actually say aloud is, I have an 88-year-old mother that I love, and I have friends and people I take care of in my practice that are at higher risk than I am. And if people want to get more selfish about it, I think like not having a cold, I am a sort of person who gets a lot of colds. Not having a cold for 2+ years is great. And so how do we communicate that? Because especially on public transit, I'm at an airport now, and the airport is more dangerous than the plane, but the buses and trains, that's such high danger. On a positive, if you're wearing a really good quality mask and you're not on there forever, and you have to add in all these factors. Hopefully the person sitting next to you doesn't have BA2, which is so contagious. I mean, there are all these things we know from different environments. But I would say, wear the best mask you can get, try and get lots of good masks, but also maybe just having one-on-one conversations with people to explain how hurtful it is, both in terms of a risk to the health, but also the sense that I don't matter as a person, or my extra challenges don't matter to anyone is so unspeakably hurtful. I can't understand how people can do that. Yeah. Ooh, that's great. Microcovid.org helps you calculate. That's great. So I don't know if there are particular things you wanted me to speak about. I mostly just wanted to say this is so important, and thanks to everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aronson. I wonder, just before you probably have to board your plane soon, but I wonder if you wanted to say anything about the ageism that we've seen in this pandemic and just how seniors are affected.
Oh, it's shocking. Seniors and people with disabilities both, but the fact that it's not even mentioned. I mean, what I'm hearing now, I give a talk in which I show the 9 elements of pandemic response, and basically seniors whom we knew were at highest risk before the pandemic even started in the United States were prioritized for one of those 9 items, one. And then when you hear things now, there also seems to be a sense that, there are people who are disadvantaged by their being an essential worker, or people who are disadvantaged by race and at higher risk for those reasons. And that's all true, but somehow in the public discourse, people can't allow for a person being all those things at once. An older person of color who needs to take public transit, or that any one of those things individually, makes a person, worthy of something, of just basic attention that we would have seen if it was any other group. And I am seeing a lot in the media about this group's at highest risk and that group is, and most of that is true. And yet they're always leaving out the actual much highest risk group. They'll say this is a 3-fold risk. Well, 3-fold versus, 3,000-fold, there is actually a difference. And I think, actually, I'll just do a shout out to my colleague, Anna Chodos, who's doing this 80/80 project that I think is launching on KALW tomorrow. But what she's trying to do is sort of show that people think like, oh, anybody who's old doesn't matter, and just sort of show the history of the Bay Area through these people and show them as human beings, not as others. But it really hasn't been prioritized. And I'm a little afraid that people are moving beyond that moment and not even listening. So we have to make a lot more, thanks, Shauna. Yeah, we just have to make a lot more noise that it's not okay. And I guess I would just add, the last thing is people add the race issue in there, saying, well, if you're old, chances are you're white. And there's something to be said for that. Do more white people live to advanced old age? Yes. Do more wealthy people live to advanced old age? Yes. Do people with more education live to? Yes. But that doesn't mean other people don't. It's an odds thing, and everybody matters. So just somehow getting that out when people are having other conversations, to say, yes, and it's not an or, it's an and.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, it's true. People often aren't thinking about how, you know, there are seniors who are also Black or Latinx people who also have disabilities, who also might have a frontline job, like a lot of seniors even are working these days. And yeah, just, you know, or have intergenerational households, kids in schools, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, I hope if you could stick around, we might have some questions from the group, but if you have to run.
No, I think
yeah.
I'm okay for a little bit, but so I'll stick around, but you know, I don't need to take questions. I can just hide in this corner a little longer because they rearranged my flight. So now I have time.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Aronson. So let's see who, I believe Lori A wanted to speak from the audience. So I'm going to ask you to unmute Lori A. All right, you're unmuted. Oh. Okay, I think that is someone Zoom bombing. So, all right, how about Warren Cushman? I know you're not a Zoom bomber.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Warren.
Good. No, I'm not a Zoom bomber. All right. I do have well, first of all, I would like to ask everyone not to chat while I'm speaking because my computer, I'm totally blind. My computer spits at me whenever I'm talking. So if you could hang on just for a sec. So my question is logistical. There were a lot of folks who've left because of the unfortunate Zoom bomber and other reasons. And I want to get a sense of, at some point, logistically, how will this all work? We know that there's an AC Transit board meeting on Wednesday and a BART board meeting on Thursday. So will you be at some point talking about the logistics of what the next steps are going to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, we are. We have, we have in our action guide, which we will post in the chat again, we have upcoming meetings. And we're going to make a Zoom room for both the AC Transit meeting on Wednesday and the BART meeting on Thursday. So people can join on Zoom and we'll all be on there and we can watch together and line up to make comment and share talking points. Yeah, so thank you for bringing that to our attention. And we also have a Google form that we'll put in the chat again. The Google form is to sign up if you want to get updates about upcoming actions and come to our meetings. So thank you, Warren, for raising that. Let's see, I see a hand from Alyssa Matra.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you for this extraordinary meeting. It's just overwhelming. I'm a senior. I live in San Francisco with my 77-year-old disabled husband who has many health issues. Our daughter and our 1-year-old grandson live in Sacramento, and we thought we had the perfect route. We would take Muni to BART, BART to Amtrak, and then my daughter would pick us up. Public transit makes me nervous, but I felt that other transit riders were really diligent in masking up. Without a mask mandate, my route to Sacramento feels perilous. Will I get COVID and pass it on to my unvaccinated grandson and my health challenged husband? It seems like you said earlier, a simple thing to do to just wear a mask to protect everyone, but especially those who either can't get vaccinated, like my grandson, or people like me and my husband who are vaccinated and boosted, but we could still get sick too. So I appreciate all of the work that you're doing and all the speakers tonight. It brought me to tears, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Alyssa. I'm really glad that you're here and that we're doing this work together. All right, I see a few more hands. Let's see, let's take a comment from Rebecca.
Thank you. So I just, I'm a peer advocate at SDA and someone with a fair number of invisible disabilities, as the term goes. And one of them is an invisible visual impairment. Half my vision is gone. And that is a real problem, especially on public transit, when I just wouldn't be able to see if several people on my right side were taking off their masks. I wouldn't be able to see it at all. So that's a real problem, and I can have real understanding for other people with all kinds of disabilities who ride public transit. Somebody else who has a difficulty is my brother, who can drive, who lives in Florida, but chooses to take public transit, but he is also at times, he's better now, but also before had real immunocompromised. And other people who are or are not disabled have immunocompromised and are still facing problems with that. It's an issue that continues as COVID continues, immunocompromised continues as well. And it's a real struggle. So, two issues that are important.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Thanks for highlighting.
Sure.
Yeah, just there's, our different disabilities affect people's need for public transit in different ways, and also can, exacerbate your chances of a severe case of COVID. So that's part of why public transit is such an important space to keep safe. Let's see, I see a hand from David Steinberger.
You're niggas. Niggas. Nigga.
Okay. All right. Okay, a hand from Moshe Zucker. All right, Moshe, you're unmuted. Okay, so sorry everyone, this Zoom bombing is really out of control. We definitely have a lot of enemies in this this organizing. So, even though this is a local event, community event, clearly there's people invested in disrupting it.
Rhea, I'd like to take a minute to share some of my experiences.
Yeah.
My name is Beth Kenny. I'm one of the co-hosts tonight. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm a person with disabilities who is immunocompromised and receives immunosuppressive therapies to treat my conditions. So I also have a 4-year-old who loves trains and a wife who we're all trying to be environmentally cautious. And so as a family, we have one car and we try and use public transit whenever we can. Since the beginning of the pandemic, public transit hasn't been available to me, but my family has continued to use it. And with the mask mandates in place, since the mask mandates were lifted, we don't feel comfortable with a child who is ineligible for vaccination and having me, their family member, be somebody at high risk for severe COVID. It has really limited our options, and we have to juggle getting places now because we can only get there by car. We can't take the convenience of public transportation and the environmental impact that we're having is really disappointing, and we're forced into it. But at the same time, we know how privileged we are that we do have a car and we do have alternative options to get to my doctor's appointments and my treatments. And I don't know how others are going to be able to make it through with that, having to face the risk of, do I put off my doctor's appointment or do I risk getting COVID on public transit? And it seems like the disability community has faced these adversities throughout the pandemic from the very beginning when the governor announced care rationing. And then when the vaccines became available, there was people with disabilities were deprioritized for vaccines. Despite having being immune compromised, I was supposed to go based on age versus need. So the policies have been very much putting my life and the life of others in jeopardy in our community. However, the undoing of the mask mandates, it's like we've become comfortable with putting vulnerable people at jeopardy. And now we can use that for cover about the risks of long COVID, because everybody is at risk for long COVID. Representative Ayanna Presley came out with a report yesterday that said 8 million people in the United States are suffering COVID long haulers. And this has impacts on your brain, on all sorts of symptoms, and we don't know enough about it. And what we do know is scary. So I just really struggle to understand why we aren't doing everything we can to stop the spread of COVID. I think I really need some of our elected leaders to tell me why they're putting policies in place that are letting it spread. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Beth, for sharing that, and also for highlighting the risk of long COVID to everyone, which I don't think came up earlier in our discussion tonight. Just that even people who assume that they're low risk, like you might be young, you might be vaccinated and boosted, you might have no other health issues at all, but you still have a chance, a pretty significant chance of getting long COVID if you become infected. And you know, I feel like I see every week new articles showing like different health impacts that can happen a year or two in after a COVID infection. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, so we want to take a couple more questions or comments. Feel free to post your comment in the chat if you want, if that's easier for you, and I can read it out. I'm also going to invite Jessica to share a couple of comments that people shared when they registered for the town hall. All right, so Jessica's going to pull those up, and then, yeah, if anyone else here wants to share, feel free to post in the chat or raise your hand.
Did you want me to go ahead, Rhea?
Sure, yeah, that'd be great.
All right, so thank you to everyone who put some really powerful questions and comments in the registration. So I'm just going to read a few of these out. Somebody says, because I use a power wheelchair, I have no choice about who I sit across from on AC Transit. Somebody says, I'm a transit rider with health conditions that put me at higher risk for COVID-19. My housemates have to take public transit to get to work. At work, they're required to be vaxxed and masked, but not on BART. Someone else says, I have a lung clotting disorder that will be exacerbated by COVID. Someone else, I have friends under 5 years old who are unable to be vaccinated. Someone else says, my wife has serious lung issues. COVID would be disastrous. A lot of similar comments about different disabilities and the impact. Somebody says, I'm disabled, chronically ill, immune compromised, and can't drive or access anything without transit. And somebody says, simply want to keep people protected since the pandemic isn't over yet. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing those. And yeah, thanks everyone for those comments when you registered. Let's see, I see a hand from Jessica. All right, and I see that Tinu has to sign off. Thank you so much, Tinu, for being here and for speaking, and just for advocating in general for accessibility and for pandemic safety. All right, Jessica Jimeno, just to clarify, there's multiple Jessica.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute.
No problem.
Okay, yeah, so because somebody mentioned it early, and I think it's the elephant in the room that public health, that our officials have downplayed as long COVID. As someone has said before, somebody said that those labels, especially with long COVID, high risk, are not exactly helpful because a lot of people who have mild infections and who have no pre-existing conditions, to their knowledge, go on to develop long COVID. And I got COVID very early in the pandemic and I was hospitalized twice. So it wasn't mild for me, but soon after I was released from the hospital, articles started coming about a long COVID, and it's physical. It can be cognitive and physical. And friends would say, "Is this you?" And I'd say, "It's not me yet. I hope I don't get long COVID on top of my 5 illnesses." And then I did get long COVID. So I don't know if it will. I know we live in an ableist society where, for many of us, our friends and family are through their actions, they're ignoring what it's doing to us. But I don't know if the message can get out there that everyone is at risk for long COVID. Long COVID is not mild. There's everything from the choking episodes, respiratory, which got somewhat better after the second Pfizer vaccine, but marathon migraines. And a lot of the time, the long COVID symptoms do not appear until sometime down the line. And people who were not hospitalized for COVID, who had quote unquote mild acute infections, have developed early dementia and other signs of long COVID. So I don't know how to get that out there because, the message people see in the media on TV is very different, but I don't know, since it was mentioned, I just put it out there.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing your experience. And I think that's really true. There's definitely a downplaying of long COVID and the risks in general, including, there are people who are like, "Oh, I got Omicron and I recovered fine." They might be saying that 1 or 2 months later, but it might be different in 6 months or a year. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. All right, so we might just have time for one more comment or question from the group, if anyone else wants to share. And if not, maybe I will invite any of the speakers who have stuck around. I know some had to leave already, but if any of the speakers wanted to follow up with a response to any of the comments, I see Cherelle is still here. Cherelle, if you'd like to respond to any of the comments, feel free to.
Yes. So, what I'm hearing is it can be tough. We have a lot of different communities that are vulnerable right now that really just need that support to make sure that they're safe. And I think it's more important to continue to reiterate how important it is to wear a mask. When we are going into and using public transit, for those of us that can ride it easily and not have as much risk, I think it's the polite thing to do. I think we can do that for vulnerable communities. We can wear a mask. I think it's important that we continue to make sure that everyone has a safe experience while riding public transit to ensure that they're not exposed to COVID. I mean, COVID has been around for a few years now, and it's something that we have to live with, right? And so because of that, this is something that we might have to ensure that we adapt and ensure that we can make sure that all communities are safe. We have marginalized communities, lower income communities, and I think the doctor had spoke about it, our seniors, and she's looking at different communities of seniors that may be exposed. But I'll tell you what, we still have our unhoused seniors, okay? And they have to get to and from their appointments. When we think about nonprofits that provide resources and benefits and programs, this means that they're taking public transit to get to and from. Now, some of them are disabled. That's the reason why they go and get resources at these different nonprofits. And so they have to use public transit. And we want to make sure that they're safe as well when they're getting their benefits and if they go without or they decide not to use public transit, this means that they're going without those resources. They're going without those benefits. And so this is crucial. And it becomes a health risk for everyone because we want to make sure that people are safe. And I think they brought up some other good points tonight, which is creating a safe environment while you're inside using transit. Social distancing, because we also don't want to have overcrowding, because I know that that can create an unsafe experience as well. And so that might mean that we have to have additional transit out, multiple, and invest in that way, and using some of those resources in funding to ensure that we have options for folks to gain access. You know, we don't want to reduce the amount of ridership. I think it's important. It reduces the carbon footprint, right? Okay, environmentally friendly as well. And I think that we have a lot of work to do. I think that we do, and we've got to get folks on board to understand, hey, we can do this. We can make our community safe, and we can create a safe environment.
Thank you so much, Cherelle. Yeah, and thank you again to all of our speakers tonight, to Cherelle, to Blue, to Louise Aronson, to Loren and Tinu, who I believe had to leave already. And yeah, so we're going to wrap up for tonight, but luckily this is just the beginning of our campaign to get masks back on transit. And in the chat, there's a link to the Google form. If you want to keep in touch with us, just fill it out and we'll let you know about upcoming meetings and actions. We'll be sharing a Zoom link to the AC Transit meeting on Wednesday and the BART board meeting on Thursday. That's a great opportunity to join and follow and make comment. Yeah, we'll have more action coming up. Also, don't forget to keep calling, emailing, and tweeting at AC Transit representatives, at SFMTA, Jeffrey Tumlin, the BART board, because the more they hear from us, the more they're going to feel like they have to do something about this and they have to bring masks back on transit. So yeah, big thank you to everyone tonight. And also thank you, Jessica and Kathy and Alice and all our back end Zoom help people. Yeah, so we'll stick around a little bit. We'll save the chat, we'll send out follow-up information, and we'll stay in touch. So yeah, thank you everyone. Kathy, if you want to play a song for us to head out to, that'd be great.